Thanks everyone for coming along. Michael Ryan is my name. So we're going to look at some slides around just generally how best to support children with their anxieties, and then looking at some self-care tips for yourselves. And then there's a little slide about some resources at the end. So just from my own point of view, I'm from Kilbeggan in Westmeath, and I grew up in a hardware store, and I was in the hotel business for a while before I found what I really wanted to do, and that was counselling. So I went back to college, and I got a job in a school, and then another school approached me, and another school, and another school. So eventually I ended up working 4 days a week in schools, and I have a private practice as well. I have probably a speciality in working with children with autism. So let's just look at some of the realities for children. So in general, they have no concept of how money is acquired or how to manage it. Generally, they have low self-regulation, and none of these things are judgments, by the way. These are just typical childhood development. It's perfectly normal for the stage that they're at. They generally have poor ability to delay gratification. They seek independence, but at the same time, they're looking for assurances of a safe retreat area. The bedroom is the only territory over which they can control, and of course that's always a war zone too for you in relation to how tidy it is kept, and how if there's food or anything left in there. Sometimes that battle is worth fighting, and sometimes it might be just a battle that's not worth fighting because they have very little control in their lives. They really do have to do everything that parents or guardians say, where they go, what they wear, what they eat. And sometimes it's just that they're trying to grab a little bit of control over the domain in which they can. Yes, of course, there are children street angels, house devils, but let's not fool ourselves. There's plenty of adults who are street angels, house devils too, so it's not just the preserve of children. They're totally reliant on their parents and caregivers. And again, not a judgment. This is perfectly developmentally correct. They're self-centered and selfish, and that's just how they're supposed to be at that stage. They're trying to regulate themselves in a brand new world, and so there's so much information and so much new things to contend with. Their brains are constantly trying to reevaluate the world, how safe it is, what they need to know, what they don't need to know, who they need to know. So that's the reason that they're so self-centered and selfish. And sometimes they lack life skills to make informed decisions. And that seems to go well through 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, dips in around the teenage years and grows back again then later on in life. So realities then for children continued. So they have a poorly developed sense of identity, and this identity is trying to be developed through a sense of their own personalities, how their family script is, what their peers are doing, who their idols are, and what trends are ongoing. And so, one day they will only be into sports gear, and the next day they'll only be into a certain brand, and then they'll need this type of runner, and then that type of jewelry, and that type of handbag, or that type of haircut, or whatever it is. Children catastrophize situations, and again, it's because they're not on the earth long enough to know what a danger really is, how much they need to worry about something, and when they can just take things with ease. Sometimes in around the 10, 11, 12 stages, they're starting to hit puberty, some tics and stammers will come in. And mostly those kind of things work themselves out as they get into their early teenage years. If they persist, obviously, it's something that the GP would need to get involved in. Their anxiety and their perceived anxiety are equally painful because they will get overwhelmed with anxiety if it's a thing that they perceive something is going to happen. And that's probably a lot to do with, say, yourselves. So they might have you might be sick, or they could fear that you're sick. And either ways, that sense of overwhelm is difficult for them. You'll know yourself too. Children, you can have two or three very different types of 8-year-olds in the house, so their biological and chronological development don't always go the same for all children. They have self-esteem challenges all the time because they're always comparing themselves to other and trying to, in a way, at a healthy level, it's okay because they'll try and be better at their work, or faster in the race or whatever. So as long as it's kept within I suppose, a manageable amount of comparison. But, and you'll know it yourself, they're always saying she's better, she's faster, he's taller, he's prettier, he's funnier, all those kind of things. They can change friends frequently, and this change is generally in around the change of developmental changes happen mostly at 2, and again at 8, 12, and then up around the age of 15, 16 again, well, 14, 15, 16. And as they kind of change their brand, they might change their friends. And most religions will have some kind of a ceremony to mark those developmental stages in around the age of 8 and 12, and then later on in life, obviously. But that's just perfectly normal. They kind of change their brand, and then their friends need to change. They can adapt to new environments and situations quite easily once their needs are met. So I'm not going to go through all of these because you'll know yourself maybe the types of anxieties that are pertinent to the younger people in your own lives. But they're kind of the top ones. I don't have coronavirus in there because, it is kind of part of world events, and those are, this one will go, but there'll be another one coming. I remember when I was a kid, the Cold War was on, and I used to look at the map and I'd say, well, America's over there and Russia's over there and Ireland is right in the middle. And if they bomb, the bomb was going to drop on Ireland. And, kids will come up with all kinds of different reasons to try and catastrophize the world. So it's tricky. It's a tricky place. So anxiety actually can be okay in certain doses, as they say. So it has a role in our lives, and it can, if it's balanced, and it can help in some situations. So it can motivate a child to perform to the best of their abilities, and particularly if a test is coming up, something like that. It can induce a desire to study and train for a challenge. And again, they don't look silly or stupid or be embarrassed if they're asked questions. It can prompt a child to learn social norms and develop skills and talents, can promote creativity in terms of how they cope in the world. It can form a basis of inventive coping strategies, so they can be inventive and creative. And then in order to avoid embarrassment, avoid looking silly or stupid, they get good at planning, organizing and forward thinking because they don't want to turn up to something without the correct stuff. This is a little bit complex looking, and it really isn't anything we're going to spend too long on because, but there is a kind of a science behind all of what we do. So when we look at the left-hand side, that's the kind of comfort of very little anxiety in our lives. The top bit is what we were just talking about there, where maybe you get optimal arousal and optimal performance when you have the right amount of anxiety. But on the right-hand side is probably what we need to look at, and that's how we deal with the anxiety at the worst end of things. So when we look at anxiety and worry, if we work at it through this kind of situation here. So the situation is where the boy is afraid of the dog, and he's afraid the dog is going to bite me. So he feels scared. He avoids the situation. He's at home and he feels I'm safe because I'm away from the dog. And this is kind of reinforcing his choice to avoid the situation. But the problem is when he goes back out tomorrow, he's still worrying. And as we can see, the dog looks quite harmless and generally is. And, dog biting isn't anything like it used to be back in the day. And so the challenge here is he's going to be back in his room avoiding the thing over and over and over again. So avoidance is not what we're looking for. When we're anxious, it's our perceived anxiousness. It's like the fire alarm goes off. and the adrenaline is sent all around the body trying to figure out, what do I need? Do I need to take fight, or do I need to fight this situation, or do I need to take flight from it? And inevitably there is no fire to put out. Um, so when we're faced with a difficult situation, our first reaction is to accommodate or avoid the fear. And that's generally, as the caregiver, it's our first reaction because, for one, it's easier. You think it's helpful, and you feel your child will feel unsupported if you don't help them to avoid that situation. And you might feel guilty or mean if you don't accommodate. And it can be hard to tolerate the child's anxiety or distress. And of course, then you feel you're going to have a night of meltdowns and comforting and all of that. But the problem with the accommodating is that it's associated with poor treatment outcomes in children and adults for anxiety. So when anxiety is at its kind of worst, there's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the therapy of choice for anxiety and fears and phobias and obsessive thoughts and those kind of things. And so when we accommodate the fears and avoid them, then the goals of CBT can be affected. So it affects the treatment. And then it limits the opportunities for the child to learn that feared consequences are likely to happen, and reduces their ability to adapt to change. So when we look at maybe just exposing the child to the fears is the way to go. So if we look at general anxiety disorder, which is, again, these are clinical, and so we'll be talking for the most part with your children as mild versions of any or all of these. So it's about exposure to the worries. So maybe encourage them to raise a hand in class if they're not confident to do so. Or if you can create little opportunities within the family. So maybe let them choose what movie to watch, even just to call a friend, or set up for them to arrange a play date rather than always waiting for somebody to come and arrange it. Or if their homework is causing them anxiety, to spend X amount of time on that. From a separation anxiety point of view, then it's exposure to time away from the parent. And when I say or a safe place, I mean that they'll be going to a safe place, but not with you. So it will be aunt, uncle, or neighbor, or whomever. And then just to say that you might be away for an hour or two when they get there, and just to rely on that parent for comfort if they need it. That's a really difficult thing to do, but it's again, it's about exposing them to a little bit of separation, healthy separation and safe separation. Agoraphobia is the fear of outside. So again, maybe just small trips to the supermarket, or obviously this is in non-COVID times, so we have to live in hope that this is all going to happen very soon. And again, social anxiety. So it's about maybe if they could call a business. So these are kind of things you need to do. So maybe if they're ordering a takeaway, you might ask that child to call in the order. They're speaking to a stranger, but it's in a very safe and controlled environment. Or maybe to wear something that they wouldn't normally wear, and encourage them to do it. Or if there's a presentation to be done at school, that they could do that, or even just to make an announcement in the school over the PA system or something like that. Somebody with selective mutism then, so again, it's gradual exposure when they feel comfortable to do so. It's obviously a huge situation if somebody doesn't speak at all. So role playing with them is great, and just when they're doing that, just try and get them to up the volume when they're doing the say if you're practicing the announcement with them, they'll probably say, could everyone in class 2 please come down to the front hall, please? And you'd say, that's brilliant. Now why don't you just try it with a little more volume? Will everyone in class 2 please come down to the front hall? And eventually, once they do it once or twice in a safe environment with you, they'll be comfortable to do it when they go to the microphone. So just try and encourage them to beat the fears. So you're talking about praising attempts, and just monitor any verbal and non-verbal reactions that they're having. So you could say, I notice your leg is shaking quite a bit, even when you're thinking about this presentation. And you'd say, that's natural. It is difficult to get up in front of people and talk. So don't worry about your shaky leg. or I notice, the paper is shaking. This will be during the, say, the role play or when they're going to do it. And it's okay just to name those things. Um, Again, we're just saying discourage the avoidance or the denial that they're anxious and reward brave efforts. So affirmations would be things like you can do it. Don't worry if you fail the first time. Everyone fails sometimes. Your best efforts are good enough. Failing is not falling down. Failing is staying down. And then to avoid victim mode. So again, this can be something in the family. So if you ever find yourself saying something like, just my luck that would happen, you're kind of in victim mode if those are kind of things you say. And the reality of it is nothing in life really is about luck. It's all just statistics. So if I was sitting here and I was worried about, say, my car outside might have a puncture, and it's, I found out and said, just my luck, my car had a puncture. But the reality is it hasn't had a puncture for maybe 2 or 3 years. So I've had nearly 1,000 days without a puncture. So it's just statistics. Someday I will go out, I'll have a puncture. And so whenever you look at something, it's usually just statistics. I just wanted to tell you a little story about the boy and the butterfly. Um, so as the story goes, I'm not quite sure if I should have inspirational story journey at the bottom of that. Anyway, as the story goes, the boy finds a caterpillar and he brings the caterpillar into the house and he says to his mother, I found this caterpillar outside. Is it okay if I keep it as a pet? And the mother says, yes, it's fine to keep it as a pet if you want, but you're going to have to make a box that has the right soil and leaves and some sticks and some branches for the caterpillar to play on. So the boy is very excited and he gets all the stuff together and he puts it all together. And every day he comes down and he sees the caterpillar doing his thing. And one day he comes down and he notices that the caterpillar has started to weave a cocoon in the kind of the bough of one of the small branches that he has put in there. And he's fascinated by this, of course, and doesn't know what the cocoon is about. But another day, he comes down and the caterpillar's gone. And the caterpillar's actually gone into the cocoon. And the boy tells his mother, I think there's something wrong. He's disappeared. The mother says, don't worry about it. That's just how nature is. And wait till you see what happens. So a day or two later, the boy is looking at the cocoon and he can see that the caterpillar is trying to squeeze out through a small little hole at the end of the cocoon, and he can see the cocoon kind of shaking, and he gets a little bit anxious about it, and he's a little bit stressed because he thinks the caterpillar is in a bit of trouble. So he goes to his mum and he says, there's something wrong here, that the cocoon is shaking, the caterpillar seems to be distressed, I want to help. And the mother says, just leave him at it, it'll be fine, and you'll see what happens. So the boy anyway looks at it for another while, and then he decides to take matters into his own hand, and he goes and he gets his scissors and he cuts open the cocoon. And out flops the butterfly down onto the bottom of the box. And the butterfly is kind of flapping around and it can't really find its feet and it can't do anything and it's really struggling, And the boy is quite distressed because he doesn't know, one, where the caterpillar's gone and what happened. So the mum explains about the caterpillar and he changes into a butterfly. But the butterfly is not doing so well. So the mother takes the boy down to the science teacher down the road. And the science teacher explains that the process of the caterpillar going through the small end of the cocoon is designed to squeeze the water out of the wings of the butterfly as it's changing into a butterfly. And it's only by squeezing the water out of those wings that the butterfly will be able to dry the wings and fly. And the boy had prevented this from happening. He just couldn't deal with the anxiety of the struggle. And so he bypassed a process and it left the butterfly with heavy wings and couldn't fly. And unfortunately, things didn't work out so well for that butterfly. But I suppose the lesson in there is that while the struggle is difficult, it's part of the process. And it's the same for all of your butterflies, I guess. And so anyway, that's the story of the boy and the butterfly. So, when you look at helping the anxious child, um, the first thing you want to do is to identify the anxious child. So, identify the anxious child. What does that mean? It means to we just need to reassure them when they're in that struggle that they're loved and that they're safe. Explain that when they're catastrophizing, it's just the way the brain works. It's trying to figure out the world and it's trying to figure out what's safe and what's dangerous. And as the brain develops, it'll figure out more of this stuff. But it's a lifelong process. It just does get easier as you get older. Help them to see logic, and we'll look at this just in a couple of minutes to identify some of the source behind the fears. Tell them they're brave and anxious to face these issues, even though you know that they're anxious and nervous. Remind them you're a team. So to use the word we is really good. And look, it only works up to a certain age because then they're way too embarrassed to be hanging around at you and dealing with you and letting you know that they're nervous and anxious about stuff. But if you say, why don't you take out that presentation there and we'll have a go at it? Or why don't we go out and we'll try and practice that shot that you can't seem to get in basketball or hurling or whatever it is. And when they know that there's a we, then they don't feel so alone in their struggle. And it's very important too, as parents and guardians, not to treat them as confidants, because they really don't need to know all about your finances, your relationships, family feuds, health issues, and job worries. You know, there's nothing they can do about it. They're too young to understand all of those things. And so try and not use them as confidants. So again, just encourage the child to confront their fears. Don't avoid things that make them anxious, so because the avoidance only makes it worse. Don't present an overly optimistic view of the world, you know, because it is possible that many of the things your child fears could happen. Failing tests, accidents, illnesses, those things can happen. So it's about trying to find a balance in how you present the world. You need to validate their fears in a way that isn't dismissive. So show that you understand the experience and helping them to move forward to face their fears, problem solve, and thought challenge. And if you can kind of capture little opportunities, you know, as you're driving along, or you know, if you're watching a movie and there's a kind of a dilemma, you can stop it and say, what would you do in this situation? How would you handle that? And we can all stop pretty much everything on the TV now and just try and use real life situations to get their opinions, how they would solve that problem, and then to challenge their thinking around, you know, I think we're going to get burgled. And you'd say, well, let's have a look at that. You know, like how many people have been burgled? And they'd say, well, I know you know, the O'Mahonys were burgled there last year. And you'd say, okay. And anybody else? Well, I think there's a good few of them in Dublin. Yeah, but around here, like, what's the actual logic around this? And then, you know, they'd realize that they're probably giving it a 9 out of 10 in terms of fear, but it really, there's a chance and a possibility, of course, but it really only deserves a 1 or less, you know. So it's about bringing logic to that and challenging their thinking on it. And ensure that you respond to worries in a calm and reassuring way, because you'll always, well, certainly if I'm on an airplane, you know, if there's a bit of turbulence and the cabin crew are still kind of serving teas and coffees, I ain't in the slightest bit worried. If the cabin crew kind of stored the tea and coffee machine and they hunker down and kind of strap up, I'm, you know, aware that this is, you know, severe turbulence, but they seem to be perfectly fine. If they're running up and down the cabin screaming and ringing their parents and telling them we're all going to die, I think it's time to get worried at that point too, you know. So if you can show the calmness, they'll pick up on the calmness and then they'll know that this thing is not to be worried about. If you're planning anything like returning to school, which you'll be doing hopefully in a few weeks, moving home, moving school, moving town, moving city, moving country even, you know, try and give them, let them know what the plan is. There are some things which you don't really need to tell them until the day before or an hour before or 5 minutes before. And you'll know your child yourself sometimes. And it's sometimes that's not about anxiety. Sometimes you don't want 24 hours of questions about whatever it is that you're going to be doing. And so, but if it is an anxious thing and they don't necessarily need, you know, a long time, just try and pick the healthiest time to tell them. And just model healthy ways of managing your own anxiety. And we'll look at a few of them later on. So making bedtime as pleasant an experience and as comfortable an environment as you can. comfortable bedding, soft lighting, soft sounds, soft smells. Creating a morning routine that allows for a nicer pace. So if 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 you're the family that it's the last minute for everything, well then getting up is going to be stress. Having breakfast is going to be stress. Trying to get them in the car is going to be stress. Trying to get them dressed and ready and all that stuff is going to be stress. So if possible at all, try and create a morning routine that allows for a nice pace so that they're not stressed all the way through until they get to school, which is going to be stressful enough in of itself. Try and avoid comparing your little people to neighbors and friends and siblings and cousins and creating kind of unhealthy competition and one-upmanship, because each of them is doing their best in their own way. Sometimes they need a little nudge in terms of friendship nurturing. So when you need to let them create and fail and flop and regroup and refriend and all of that, sometimes they do need just a little nudge to foster, a friendship that you think would be healthy. Joining clubs like Scouts, self-defense, performance things, summer camps, all of those are great for building confidence, as well as all the sports stuff that you have going on down there. Reward systems. So I always prefer reward systems to sanctions for facing fears and anxious situations. And then I've mentioned that just to limit the exposure of anxiety events, an anticipatory period as short as possible. Uh, Resilience is another great way to, I suppose, avoid the anxiety in the first place. So I just need to move this. So gentle persuasion of an avoidant child in a safe pursuit. They try not to over reassure or over scaffold. And look, I know there's a lot of text on these things, so I'm just going to go down through them. Just trust yourself that you'll pick up on the bit that's right for you and for your situation. I suppose I'm just trying to cover all bases here. Praise attempts for overcoming fears. Be clear about your expectations. And so, you know, if a kid has never spoken in class, to go straight to doing a presentation might be difficult. So it would be just about putting up their hand or even answering the roll call in some situations might be a more realistic thing. So you know yourself where your own young person is at. And then use those life opportunities to deal with disappointments, to deal with failures, to deal with embarrassments, to let them know how you're dealing with it, how you're feeling about disappointments and failures or embarrassments, and what you're hoping to do to either rectify it, get over this fear, raise yourself back up after a failure, or whatever it is. Model calculated risk taking and talk through your thought process. So you might say, I too am anxious about this presentation, but I know if I'm going to give it at work, it'll help me get on in the process. So, you could even ask them to maybe be your mock audience if you're anxious about something. Model relaxation techniques. We'll come to some of those in a little minute. So the questions then, rather than saying, were you anxious in school today? Say something like, how did you feel about school today? So, because if you say, if you were anxious, were you anxious in school today? That's the only thing they're going to think of. They're going to pinpoint in on something negative. Whereas if you leave it a little more open like that, how did you feel about school today? You'll get a broader range of their entire day. Again, just praising the rewards, praise and reward acts of bravery among family members. So again, if somebody in the family does something brave, just let your anxious child know that this is something that gets praise and that gets acknowledgement. And then really good thing for to build a child's confidence. So offer two positive choices when faced with a problem and let them choose. So ultimately, they're still going to choose a positive outcome to the problem, but they're going to feel like they chose it, and that builds confidence. And sometimes, like if you could have two children going on a roller coaster. They both feel the same thing in their tummies, but one is really nervous and the other is really excited. And you could try and get them to review that anxious feeling as an exciting feelings. So I'm not going to go down through those. They're just the kind of, I suppose, the clinical names for different ones. And you'll know yourself, trust yourself. If your child is at an extreme stage of anxiety, it will be something that you might need to go to the GP and let them decide on the best course of treatment for your child. So the next couple of slides will be ones you could show to a child, and it's just about how to beat your worries, also known as anxieties. So as we've mentioned before, creating a relaxation habit in the family. This is where you're using the logic and detective work to try and find evidence for the worry. So if the evidence shows that the risk is small, then the amount of worry should be small too. And that's just like what we said there about the burglars or something like that. Okay. This one is quite neat. So children who worry a lot, if they're worrying all day, every day, and they're coming at you with worries all the time, they're like a barrel that has no, like oil that has no barrel to contain it. So what we try and do is try and get the child to externalize the worry and get it into a worry box or jar or something like that. So to write it out, and then at 7 o'clock in the evening, whether that's every evening or whether you decide maybe twice a week would be enough. So it could be like Talk Tuesday, Talk Thursday, or it could be like Worry Wednesday or something like that. And 7 o'clock is usually a good time to do it. And when they're worried about something, you encourage them to write it down on a bit of paper, put it in the worry box, and you'll deal with it at 7 o'clock. So what it does is, one, it gets it out of their system, and two, it gets them trained into waiting to deal with a worry, because everyone coming here this evening has worries about something or other. Somebody's not well, some issue at work, all of those kind of things. But you've parked them for the hour or so to deal with this, and you'll either deal with them later, you'll deal with them tomorrow. We all have to learn to deal with stuff at a certain time. So you then will have a opportunity to open that box and deal with that worry, and if they're coming in before that time and they have the worry, just say, look, put it in the box and we'll deal with it at 7 o'clock. And eventually at the start, they'll think, oh my God, that is a small box. It's only a shoe box. I'm going to fill that in one day, But in fact, actually, they start to not fill it much at all. But they'll know that the worry will be dealt with. And sometimes it's healthy for them to just call the worry, a nasty name, and just, to talk to it, say, go away, I'm in charge, stop, leave me alone, buzz off. And there was a young lad I was working with, and he gave me permission to use the picture on the right-hand side. So let's say if he was worried about Jimmy, who really annoys and hassles him and that kind of stuff in class. So he would imagine Jimmy, and he'd imagine Jimmy in a tutu. So whenever he was worried that Jimmy was going to do or say something, he'd imagine him in tutu, and then he'd just dance Jimmy out of his mind. Competing demands, again, just distracting yourself from the worry is a really healthy thing to do. So you can't be worried and relaxed at the same time. So either you go to a place in your mind that is comfortable, or you actually do something. So you're either reading the book as a family, or you're thinking about a holiday, you're listening to music, you're playing a sport, or you're thinking about a sport that you like, or you're watching a movie, something like that. I always get young people to create a little piece of art in relation to a safe place to go in their head. So that could be, for me, I know it was circus when I was a kid, but circuses are kind of gone now. So it could be about some horse riding or football or doing ballet, or some memory you have from a holiday, or maybe it's about your grandparents. And just ask them to draw a picture of the safe place to go in their head, put it on the wall, and it'll remind them that when they're worried, they can go to that place. Some belly breathing, of course, is great. So you just get the young person to put their hands on their tummy, because all worry is in the head and all the solution is in the body. So once you're thinking more about your body than your head, you are grounded. And so we get children to put their hands on their tummy, and then they just breathe in and out. And as they feel their tummy rising and falling, it's actually taking their attention away from their mind and into something in their body. So the breathing in of itself is quite good, but the focusing of the belly breathing and diaphragmatic breathing, as we call it, is actually how they're going to distract themselves from the worry. Exercise is also great. So what exercise does ultimately in the body is it creates the endorphins that rush up to the brain and say, listen, this body is moving really fast, or they're stretching out bits and pieces that they haven't stretched in a long time. and it's exerting itself. And so what the body then does is it prepares the relaxation chemicals that you need to kind of re-regulate the body. So any bit of exercise is great just to reset the system. We'll be talking about sleep in a few minutes for yourselves, so it's the same kind of rules apply for yourselves and them. But if you want to get that sheet, it'll be on the PDF at the end. So when we look at beating worries, then use logic against your worries. Scale your worries to bring them down to match the risk. Lock them up in the worry box or jar. Make them wait for worry time. Tell them to get lost. Distract yourself. Move your body. Use the breathing exercises. Have a safe place to go in your mind and get a good night's sleep. So I just wanted to do a quick body scan with yourselves, if you could. So you can leave your cameras on or off as you wish. And I just want you to sit back, and we're just going to do a small little meditation if we could. So I just want you to uncross your legs and just plant your 2 feet on the ground. We're just going to do a quick body scan. So anyone who's not really used to meditation or visualizations or anything like that, this is just a really handy one to get going with. And this is something you can practice with your children. So I just want you to close your eyes, and I want you to think about the top of your head. I just want you to let your arms rest wherever they are, doesn't matter. And just before we think at the top of our head, I just do a few breaths, just take a few deep breaths in and out. Any old breath, whether it's in through the nose or in through the mouth, it doesn't matter. And I just want you to think about the top of your head, and then just to scan down through your head, through your face, noticing if your forehead is furrowed, noticing any eye muscle tension you might have, any muscles around the eyes, just to relax your jaw a little bit. And as you move down into your neck and into your shoulders, just to notice any tension that's there. And just maybe move your neck if you so wish, just to stretch out any bit of tension that might be there. And then you move down through your arms, through your left arm. And just notice any tingling in your left hand. And just think down through your right arm. And just notice any tingling in your right hand. And then as you move down through your body and through your abdomen area, and you just scan down through your left leg, down through your calf, and just notice any tingling in your left foot. And just scan down through your right leg and notice any tingling in your right foot. And I just want you to scan again from the top of your head down through your face, noticing any tension that's still there. Around your eyes, your jawbone, in your neck and in your shoulders, in your torso, in your thighs, in your legs, in your feet, through your arms and your hands. And just relax anything where you find any bit of tension. And when you're ready then, we'll carry on a little bit. So just to notice that that is a very quick body scan, and it can be done in 5 seconds, or you can do it over 5 minutes. We took about 3 minutes there to do it, and you don't need to take that long, but it's really useful just to kind of observe any time, or at any time, and particularly if you're working on the screen for a long time, you'll notice that your shoulders will be hunched up, and when you just attend to it, they'll just drop a little bit. So when we look at parents and caregivers' anxieties, so as we know, anyone in the house, when they're anxious, that can be passed around to all members of the family. So this is your time to try and, I suppose, look at your own anxiety and try and reduce that in as much as you can, so it's not shared around. In an ideal situation, and of course, I know this is not always possible, households should try and aim to be anxiety-free zones and extend that out when you're in the car, at meals, out, or on holidays. I know that's a little bit Walton-esque, but I have to try and throw it in there just to try and see. I want you to try and observe your environment and try and find ways in which you can reduce the overall anxiety. Your modeling of calmness is a bit like what we spoke about earlier with the air stewards, So when you model calmness, when a child is anxious and you're modeling calmness, they will react to that calmness. And again, as we were saying, normalize their anxieties and reassure them that everyone has those, and then in turn that, I suppose, turn the strength to rebalance their unease. So when they are anxious and they come out of it, or they employ some kind of a coping mechanism to rebalance their unease, just that will strengthen their whole sense of themselves. So the reality is for parents, none of these are going to come as anything new or strange to you, but sometimes it's useful for us just to remind ourselves of just what is going on in our lives and why we are experiencing anxiety. So you're exhausted from trying to keep up with the changing trends and all of the different situations that you find yourself in. Generally, we're financially stretched trying to balance the budget. And that's about the budget in relation to needs and wants and demands versus image and friends and internet. And all of those things are causing us to constantly want to change our situations and keep up with trends and all of that. So again, we're stretched between the generations. So generally you'll have somebody above you who's looking for attention and needs and wants and all of that kind of stuff. And you'll also have people below. So you're generally in what we call the squeezed middle. And it's really difficult to be in there because both sides are demanding of your time, and that can be quite stressful. Anyone who's in the first time parenting, of course, they're going to have additional anxieties. As you kind of get on through it, they tend to not be quite as intense. And they often think of that story, when the first child eats dirt, you rush them off to accident and emergency, When the second child eats dirt, you kind of consider taking them to the doctor. Third child eats dirt, you go, gosh, when's the time for that child's tea, So you'll know yourself, depending on where you are in terms of the whole parenting situation. Coping with your own emotions and challenges, that's normal at this stage. I'm not going to mention the midlife crisis stuff, but it is a kind of a thing. And I suppose it's just something we all have to deal with. So coping with physical changes and the aging process, again, it's just a fact of life. You're trying to maintain friendships and family relationships and deal with all of those. Of course, with parenting comes the loss of independence, sometimes the figure, sometimes your identity, sometimes your career path, nights out, spontaneity, freedom, sleep, all of those things. I'm sorry now if I'm stressing you out. You came here to be relaxed, and here I am reminding you of all the things that make you anxious. But we'll get to the coping mechanisms in a second. Personal relationships always are something to be worked on also, and that can be a challenge. And then, of course, we're in, well, I think I'm supposed to say remote learning as opposed to homeschooling, and you're trying to keep everybody safe. On the next sheet that I'm going to put up, it'll just give you a sense of all of the things you're trying to deal with at the minute. And it's quite a challenging sheet, but I do really just want to remind you of everything that you're dealing with at the minute. I'm not going to go down through all of these things, but there's in around 90 different jobs on there for you that you're contending with at any given time. And you've pretty much to be an expert on all of those things. All of the time. You may end up doing all of them in a single day, in fact. So it's no wonder you're tired. It's no wonder you're exhausted. Um, and some of those things are, fun, but some of them are quite serious, and some of them are, like trying to be the figure out what's happening on the internet for your children and doctor stuff and medical stuff and all of that. And you have to be the entertainer and the fortune teller and all those kind of things. What I'd like you to do, if you could, I don't know if you all have access to just a sheet of paper. I should have prepared you for this in advance. I just want you to get a sheet, if you could, and just draw 2 lines on it, just like that. If you have access to a sheet of paper, just literally draw 2 lines like that. And just for 1 minute, I don't want you to think too much about this. Just for 1 minute, I want you to map out your life over the past 12 months since this pandemic started. So there was highs of, maybe there was great weather and everyone's at home and you're having a great time. And then there was lows of somebody got sick or ill or even died, or you got COVID yourself, or there were just other challenges throughout the year. So somebody's sheet might look like this. Somebody else might be mostly low. Somebody else might be really flat. And somebody else might have actually had a great time over the 12 months with a few hiccups. So again, just it'll probably end up something like that. Just trust yourself. Go from left to right. And if you wish, you can highlight the things on it that were the highs and the lows. And just take a minute to do that. So you'll end up with something. And really, just on that, I just wanted you to kind of acknowledge everything you've been through in the past 12 months. And it's been quite tough for most people. When we think of life, we think of something like a bus, and the concept of who's driving your bus is useful to kind of contemplate. So you're talking about um, everyone who's on the bus is in your life, and sometimes we feel, yes, we're in the driver's seat, we are fully in control, but most of us will probably see ourselves halfway down the bus or maybe at the very back of the bus, and everybody else is in control. Whether it's a boss, whether it's employers, employees, whether it's friends, whether it's kids, whether it's spouse, whether it's whomever. So in an ideal situation, you may say, "Oh, my kids are in the driving seat because I have to take them to ballet, and I have to take them to GA, and I have to take them here, and I have to get them this, and I have to bring them to school and do all that." But the reality of it is, even if you're in the driving seat, you're still going to choose those things, but you just won't feel like you're out of control. And you might say, I have an elderly mother and I have to go down and see her and I have to go down and tend to her and all that kind of stuff. So you might feel that she's in the driving seat. But in fact, in your life, you could, if you wanted, put her in a nursing home or something else. You are actually in control. You're choosing to do that stuff. So rather than feel that you're down at the back of the bus, you've got to acknowledge that you are actually in the driving seat and you're making those choices. Because sometimes you'll feel like you're here and all the situations are here in control, but the reality of it is you're here, you're choosing, your day may not look different, but you're going to say, well, at least I'm choosing to do that because I'd rather not do this. And I'm choosing to bring them to GAA because I'd rather them not just be on the PlayStation. And then there might be some people who are on this bus who are toxic in your life, and you may wish to just open the door, boom, kick them out. And that's okay too. That has to happen sometimes, and don't be afraid to do it. I'm not talking about your family members or your mother or anything like that. Maybe some of them, but there might be some friends, or there might be some people who you allow into your life who really aren't adding anything to it, and you've run your course and you need to just maybe reevaluate. It's always helpful to consider your, say, 100-year-old self. Not quite sure what age we're going to die, but say we come on the earth at 0 and we drop off at about 100 or something like that. And if you put everyone ahead of you, then you're going to come on the earth and you're going to drop off eventually. And you'll never have been number one because nobody else is going to put you number one in that lifespan. So you've got to put yourself number one. So I want you to try and think about your 100-year-old self and consider what would they say about how you're dealing with your own self-care. We're in the middle of this pandemic, and I suppose just the old saying goes, never let a good crisis go to waste. So it's a really good time to maybe set a few goals, but because by the time we get out of this thing, to have some goal about whether it's weight loss or doing some exercise thing or starting a business or starting a course, or at least starting a course to start a business, or write that book or plan that trip or whatever it is. Anytime we'll do with self-care, you'll always see that thing. You can't pour from an empty cup, so you have to take care of yourself first. And the reason that we would have a culture of self-care is about, our family and friends and ourselves need us to be content, balanced, safe, and healthy. We need to role model self-care for our families, and people learn from actions more than words. So I often think, kind of, when I was growing up, our parents would be sitting on committees and sitting on various bits and pieces and this and that. And while they never once ever said to us, you should do committee work or you should do whatever, inevitably we've all ended up as kind of, serial committee members and, steering group people and setter-uppers of things and all of that kind of thing. So then healthy people tend to remain stable in their roles and working in their personal life. You'll have a more balanced, content, and relaxed life. You'll avoid burnout, you live longer, and you live happier. So there is a kind of a concept where there's just five. If we can get these 5 pillars of life correct, everything else will fall into place. So we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about exercise, we're talking about sleep, we're talking about relaxation, and then we're talking about community connection. So Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, I saw him on the television the other day. He has a new book out, but he had the 4 pillars of wellness. And then I kind of cheekily added a 5th one to it. So when we're talking about nutrition, then I'm not going to go down through everything. I just want you to look at these few screens as we go through it and just kind of consider for yourself what might need to be adjusted. And we're just going to do a little bit of goal setting in a minute or two. So just think about, the 5 a day, all the different colors, the 12-hour eating window, which just means you maybe finish at eating at 8 and not eat till 8 the following morning. Are the 5-2 methods, which seems to be pretty good for people who are maybe pre-diabetic, but it's actually good for all or any of us. So maybe eat normally on 5 days of the week, and 2 days you might have just 800 calories. And then, of course, all the usual stuff of lowering down refined carbs, sugar, fat, salt, and processed foods. Don't worry about it. Something will come to your mind that you might need to address, and we'll look at that in a minute. In relation to, say, the physical end of things, they say like 7 to 10,000 steps a day is good. There's a little app called the 7-Minute app, which takes you through about 13 different exercises in the morning, just for 30 seconds each. And it just kind of works down through all the different bits and pieces of your body and sets you up for the day. If you want to get into yoga, there's lots of free stuff. Adrienne is a 30-day starter for anyone who's never done it before. But pretty much anything that gets the blood flowing and gets you a little bit out of breath and gets the heart racing 3 or 4 times a week is going to keep things right. When we look at relaxation, again, part of this is about our psychological attitude to life, as well as the actual act of trying to do things relaxing. So we basically just need to get our stress numbers down, because they'll go up during the day. So anything we can do, that's why legally there are breaks in the workplace. There are, split shifts are gone. The late and earlies are more or less gone in terms of how employers can do your roster. We have holidays that are mandatory to take and all of that kind of stuff. So because it's such a necessary part of life, most Western countries have built those in legally. It's great to externalize any concerns that you have. Writing, vlogging, blogging, anything like that is great to just get it out. Getting in nature and grounding yourself, recharging, enriching. Having a sense of humor, of course, is great. So there is even a thing called laughter yoga, which just gets you to laugh for the sake of laughing. Now, if you're doing that in a group, you actually will end up laughing at the other people who are laughing for absolutely no reason. Have a look at it on YouTube. It's not for everybody, but sometimes it's good because even if you're artificially doing it, it tricks the brain into thinking you're actually in a happier mode, and so it actually creates the positive endorphins and dopamine. Um, Finding a creative outlet is really good for lifting your spirit and your soul, and also getting out the creative element to you, which is all in your right hand brain. We tend to work, the logical bit is our left hand brain, which means we're mostly right handed, and left hand people you'll probably find are certainly more artistic because the right hand side of our brain is more artistic. So anything that you can kind of engage with the arts will rebalance the brain. And then trying a meditation app like Calm or Relax or one of those are great. And then there's a thing called progressive muscular relaxation. It gets you to tense and release all the muscles in your body. So again, it's tricking your body into creating the relaxing chemicals. It takes about 20 minutes. It's really good. From a sleep point of view, so the bedroom, bedtime is sleep time, and we're looking for about an average of 8 hours a night. Um, Really healthy to have no tech for about 90 minutes before we go, because the blue light, well, the blue light, you can have a filter on the phone, which is good, but if you don't have a blue light filter, the brain thinks it's daylight, and so it stops the production of melatonin, which is what we need. As you're drifting off to sleep, it's great to think of 4 positive things that happened in the day, and then one thing that might be improved upon. Not to think of it out to yourself, just one thing to be improved upon. And then look at purposeful living, having something to get up for in the morning. That's always a really healthy, I suppose, mindset to have as you drift off to sleep. So try and have stuff planned for the morning, whether it's some kind of exercise or something like that. You have kids, so there's no end of things that you're going to have to get up and do for. But it's just purposeful living is really something we all need to reach for. So monitor caffeine intake after lunch, and then have a routine time for rising every day. In relation to community connection, of course, this is something that we struggle with quite a bit at the minute. So it's important to try and remain connected to family and friends, and look, relationships take work and consistent commitment to nurturing and refreshing those friendships. So try and be the friend who arranges the get-togethers and reaches out, because people can be very shy just by nature, and might be a long time waiting for stuff to happen. So whether that's a Zoom now, or starting something in the school community, or trying to get maybe a bit of yoga going with the parents committee or something. I think you already have that. Did I see something? You have Pilates on the go now or something like that. So you're pretty advanced down there in Clocharince actually already, But if there's something going on and you want it to happen, be the person who gets it going, I know it used to drive my father mad, and we had a shop, and people come in and say, "Do you know what they should do? They should have a tennis court in this town, or you know what they should do? They should have more of this and less of that." And more. And he'd say, "But you're the day. Why don't you?" Ah, not at all. I couldn't be doing that kind of thing. And it literally is just to take somebody to start something, and next thing you'll find there's a whole load of people want to get involved. So be part of a community group, whether that's spiritual, volunteering, hobbies, neighborhood sports, whatever it is, because those are all just parts of development of the world. And as the saying goes, always leave a place or employment or a group better than it was when you got there. That'll keep you fresh and invigorated while you're in it. And then give back to the society. Because look, I love that old saying, a candle loses nothing by passing along its flame. So whatever bit of wisdom you have, whatever bit of knowledge you have, no harm to let others know about it. Give somebody a dig out, whether they need a hand with setting up a business, setting up a group, whatever it is. You might just have a small nugget of info that'll help them. So if you don't have it there, I just want you to get a sheet of paper if you could. And we're going to just do out 5 goals under those 5 topics that we spoke about there. Okay. So I just want you to get a sheet of paper. Now, look, if you don't have a sheet of paper, if you think about changing something in your life, it has about a 15% chance of happening. If you write it out and keep it to yourself, about a 50%. And if you share this with, I suppose, what we call a friend or a wellness partner, but somebody who's going to encourage you along the way, has about an 80% chance of happening. So the goals should be specific in that you're going to say, I'm going to run that 5K. Should be measurable in the sense that it's, whether it's, let's just take the 5K as an example. I'm going to be specific. I'm going to run the 5K by the end of March, say. It's going to be measurable. Well, 5K is 5K. It's going to be achievable. So you're not trying to do a marathon by the end of March, but you're trying to do a 5K. It has to be realistic. So look, if you have chronic arthritis, maybe that's not a realistic goal for you. So that could be about you're going to write a book or something like that, or you're going to do a 2K, whatever is achievable for you. So you've got to be realistic, and it's got to be time bound. So you're going to say by the end of March, but there's no point in saying I'm going to run a 5K by the end of next week if you're a couch potato, So and it's also not right to say I'm going to run a marathon by the end of March, but you might say I might run a marathon by this time next year. So try and keep them SMART. And, no matter what you're doing, any choice you make, just try and ask yourself, am I moving towards my goal or moving away from it? As I was saying there earlier, wellness partner or friend, so it's somebody that you can check in with in relation to your goals, somebody who's trustworthy, somebody who's considerate enough. So if you're not achieving the stuff, they'll not just say, feck it, don't worry about it, but they might push you a little bit, So just try and think of someone in your life to link in with after today. We sometimes say, there's no point in me starting a degree because that's going to take 4 years or something like that. So never be put off starting a new process because of the length of time it's going to take, because that time will pass. The time will pass anyway, and you might as well have your task or course or goal at the end of that time. And this kind of pandemic is a perfect opportunity for you to say, well, look, I'm going to start to learn that musical instrument, or if you live in a housing estate, don't let it be a violin, please, because that ain't pleasant for your neighbors. But it could be about starting to sing, or it could be about piano or something else. But saxophone as well, that ain't a great one for the neighbors. But whatever it is, don't worry about the time. The time is going to pass. You might as well be running that 5K by the end of March. You might as well be writing that book by the end of the year. You might as well be doing that course by the end of 4 years, because the 4 years will pass and you might as well be holding a certificate as not. This is just something about being grateful, and we're going to write out a few things that we're grateful for on this sheet also. And as the saying goes, love what you already have and you will want for nothing. Something that sometimes stops us from making a change is, let's look at this hourglass as our lives, okay? Top bit is the future. The stuff going down through the middle is the present, and the bottom bit is the past. And one of the challenges we have in life is we sometimes live in the past. And we live there with our regrets and our worries and our fears and our shame, our guilt, all of those things. Total and utter waste of time. Because all of those things have already happened. And there's not the slightest thing in the world we can do about it. Now, you might say worry and fear are things about the future, but in fact, they're only based on your experiences of the past, because you have absolutely no idea about what's in the future. So there's absolutely no point in worrying about them or being fearful of them. What will happen will happen. You'll deal with them then. So they're only, worry and fear are habits you've picked up in the past. Regrets, the thing has already happened. Not a line bit of change you can make to that. Guilt also, you did it, forget about it, move on. You were much more immature at that time. You didn't have the wisdom that you have now, so you're giving out hell to yourself now about something you did in the past when you were immature. And shame, look, whatever it was that you did, everyone has a bunch of that stuff in their past and in their history. And anyway, you'll probably find the shame doesn't even belong to you, That could be something that happened to you, but you carry the shame around for it. That shame doesn't belong to you. So if you're living in the past, then the past never changes. and so nothing ever changes. There's nothing we can do about the present because that's just going to drip, drip, drip away there all the time. The future, so we need to live between the present and the future in the sand that's in there because that's all we can actually control. And so I'd love for you to stop living in the past, forget about all that shame, guilt, regret, and then drop worry and fear because it's a total and utter waste of time, and climb right up into the top of that hourglass because that's what you can control. I just want to do a small little meditation. I know I've just run a few minutes over. I know some people may have to go, and that's okay. But if you can just hold on for another couple of minutes, we'll be finished then. I just want to do a small little meditation with you just for a second. So if you can, again, just close your eyes and just plant your 2 feet on the ground. This is a really neat little grounding exercise that you can do pretty much anywhere. If you're doing it in the car, please don't close your eyes. And I just want you to focus for a minute on, if you've closed your eyes, you'll probably have a few little shapes of light of different things that you've just been looking at. So just notice the shapes that are, if your eyelids are like a cinema screen, you just notice little shapes and bits and pieces there. Just to notice them. As you take a few deep breaths, just to relax your system a little bit. And now I'd like you to just focus on your sense of smell, and just to smell whatever it is. You've already been smelling it for a long time, so it's not going to be unusual for you or new. Just to notice if there is any smell. And I want you to just run your tongue in around your mouth. Just notice any taste that's in there from something you've just eaten or drank, or maybe that there's no taste there at all. And now I'd like you to just notice where you're sitting on the seat. Notice where your back is touching maybe a cushion or the back of the seat, or maybe you're just sitting upright. Notice where your bottom has been supported by the chair. To notice how your feet are being supported by the ground or the floor. And just to notice any air on your hands and on your face, just as it gently breezes across. Just to notice these are, this is using the sense of touch. And now I'd like you to focus on your hearing for a minute, and I'd just like you to try and notice any sounds that are in the room that you're in. And now I'd like you to try and notice any other sounds that are in your house. And now I'd like you to try and throw your hearing out wider and see if you can notice any sounds that are outside your house. And when you're ready, just come back into the space that we're in. So again, that's just a very, very brief 5 senses check-in. And again, it takes you out of your worry, out of your mind, out of your anxiety, and into the body. So once you're connected with a sense, you can't really think about what it is that was on your mind. As thoughts come and go, as you focus on those senses, just let them come, let them go, and trust that you'll deal with them later on if they're important enough. If they're not important, they'll just disappear. So what I'd like you to do just for a minute or two is just to write down one little action you could do under each of those 5 pillars. So the nutrition, the movement, the relaxation, the community, and the sleep. Just 5 little things that you think you could easily incorporate into your life to shift up on those 5 pillars. I then want you to write out 3 life goals, a small, a medium, and a large. Now, that'll depend on yourself. If you're already fairly active, a small goal might be to do a 5K. But if you're really inactive, that could be a large goal. A large goal could be to get that degree, get that master's, get that doctorate, whatever it is. It could be to write the book, release a song. It could be to renovate the house. It could be to move house, move country, move whatever, move careers. Medium goal, again, it depends on yourself. That could be to do the half marathon, lose the stone, whatever it is, you know. So just write out 3 life goals. And then maybe you might want to do it on a separate sheet of paper if you're going to send those off to a picture of those things off to a friend. So just write down 5 things that you're grateful for in your life. I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to do those. Don't spend too long on them. Trust whatever first comes into your mind is going to be manageable and what really is looking for attention. Just trust whatever comes into your mind first. We just take another minute at that. Okay. So I hope you managed to get something down on the sheet. And yeah, these are just a couple of books that might help in your missions. So the first 3 there are from the What to Do When, and the HSE have these on the reading list. So I've used them all quite a bit, and they're really good. The worry one on the left is one I use quite a lot actually. So the one on the right hand side is the Huge Bag of Worries. That's one probably more suitable for kind of 7 years and down, and the others are probably from 8 years and up. There's 2 apps there which are quite good. Calm is probably the most downloaded app in the world, I think, and Smiling Mind is a great one for kids. Both free, or at least there's free versions of them. As you get a little bit deeper into Calm, I think there might be a fee paying thing, as there are with a lot of these, but there's generally enough on the free stuff for you. And there's a bunch of resources. You can have a look at those on the PDF when you get them. And that's it. If there was anything specific that you wanted to deal with, you feel free to drop me an email yourselves. And again, my details will be on the PDF when you get it there, or if you want to take a screenshot of that and just drop me an email, I'll be happy to answer something, because not everyone wants to deal with stuff in public like this. So I'm just going to stop sharing there. And that's it. Thanks a million for inviting me down, and the best of luck to you with all of your goals.